5 minutes, please.
It's fairly safe to say that I rather like Thunderbirds. As 60s puppet shows about the future and rescuing people go, not too bad in my opinion. It is in fact my favourite television series, and to go into detail about all the reasons why and how I came to love it so would bloat this silly little video to an even sillier length. Even though Thunderbirds is quite niche when compared to other franchises, it's clear that I'm not the only one with a fondness for it. Despite consisting primarily of only 32 episodes and 2 slightly odd films,
What on earth?
all of which came out over a relatively short span of time between 1965 and 1968, the series proved to possess some sticking power and enjoyed 2 major revivals in the 1990s and early 2000s. You hear people in the fanbase talk about the earlier revival a lot, and with good reason. The episodes were rerun on BBC Two, and a lot of new and iconic merchandise came out. It was as if the series was brand new all over again, which helped a lot of new fans to discover it. But what you don't hear talked about so much is the revival that came in the following decade, which I think is a shame, not least because that's the one that caught me. In fairness, it might be because Thunderbirds in the 2000s is overshadowed for many by something they're desperately trying to forget, but we had new magazines, toys and bed sheets based on the original as well. And 90s kids, yes, your Tracy Island was cool and all, but could it do this?
Calling International Rescue. Thunderbirds are go.
Try making that on Blue Peter. Long story short, I'm very nostalgic for Thunderbirds in the 2000s. Everything from the merchandise to the way it was marketed was almost as formative for me as the episodes themselves were. So imagine how intrigued I was when I came across this when browsing eBay one day. Thunderbirds Style Guide for Mac and PC, version 4. Huh. Now, for the uninitiated, a style guide is usually a resource made for a group of people trying to produce things in a consistent way. Newhart's Rules, for example, is a book that outlines all the punctuation and grammar conventions a writer needs to follow, if they want to write in the proper, correct Oxford way. In the world of entertainment and marketing, style guides are used to help build a cohesive brand image, making sure the logo's the same on the DVD and the toy box, that sort of thing. Think of them like story bibles, but for how things look and are presented. And also like a story bible, these resources are usually internal, for use within the company that owns whatever property the style guide is for, and not for the perusal by the likes of Joe Blogs. So, did that mean I had found a highly elusive, hitherto unknown piece of Thunderbirds history that could spill secret behind-the-scenes information on the handling of the series in the new millennium? No. After a tiny amount of research, I found that whilst the Thunderbirds Style Guide isn't a common find, it's not exactly super rare. With Carlton Communications, the then rights holders of Thunderbirds, having long been eaten up by other companies, it's not as though this 25-year-old disc is being guarded from the public anymore. It seems that these things pop up for sale with very little fanfare from time to time, and were actually digital versions of a physical book, which also pops up on eBay from time to time with little fanfare. But, that said, the one I found wasn't that expensive, and no one else was bidding, so I put in a price, and lo and behold, I won! Twice. Yeah, I bought it twice. I didn't realise this one was for Mac only, and I don't have a Mac. Told you they weren't that rare. So what's actually on this disc? Let's take a little tour. The contents of the disc are organised into 6 folders, the first of which is labelled Welcome, so that's where we'll start. There isn't as much to see in this one, apart from a few text files. There's a contents page of sorts, an introduction that outlines what Thunderbirds is, some legal stuff, and instructions on how to use the materials in the guide. The short synopsis is the most interesting find here. It's a briefing to get users up to speed on the property they're working with, and it does its job well enough. If you aren't familiar with Thunderbirds, firstly, well done for making it this far, good grief. And secondly, this introduction would tell you most of what you needed to know. Interestingly, some media produced after this disc seems to have used bits of this synopsis verbatim. The back of the box for the GameBoyColour game, for example. This is a trend we'll start to see with other items on the disc. Speaking of, the next folder is called Design Elements, and its contents are exactly what it says on the tin. We've got a couple of variations on the logo, examples of fonts and typefaces, and a fun chart of colours, all of which were called into service when the next DVD box or annual or what have you was being put together. The sad little Anorak in me finds this all very interesting, but also quite surreal. To see this style and branding that I've become so familiar with over the years, broken down into its base elements and organised into neat little files on a CD-ROM, it's just a little odd. Does anyone else think that? If so, hold on to your pointy hats. Folders 3, Characters, and 4, Rescue Vehicles, are fairly similar. Each contain a text file going over character bios and technical details respectively. And similarly to the introductory synopsis from the first folder, some lines of these were lifted by media that had fact files and such like. These are just a few examples from my collection. It's kind of funny to think how many people in the marketing teams might have taken this style guide's words as gospel for these details, when most Thunderbirds fans know that no lore in this series has ever been consistent. Different sources are always contradicting each other. This happened even within the 2000s. Take the box of this Thunderbird 2 toy, for example, from 2004. It takes the first line about the craft from this file, and then decides that actually the top speed is 5,000 miles per hour, not 2. The rest of the files in these folders are various pieces of stock artwork of the main characters and craft. And these are alright. They're not the most dynamic they've ever looked, and John here looks like he's been hit by a truck made of Botox. However, their simplicity does encapsulate something unique to the 2000s revival. It always seemed oddly aimed at a slightly younger demographic than its predecessor. Some might take umbrage with that, but it worked on me, so I can't complain. In fact, this picture of Thunderbird 3 was the first thing on this disc that made me go, oh, that's the what's it, the doodah from the thingamie, that. It's strange how certain things can immediately take you back to a page in an 18-year-old magazine. Anyone else remember Super 6? No, just me? Okay. Folder the 5th is packaging, and it's my favourite part of the disc. Why? That will be because of the file 5.05c. Need I say more? These blue dots were everywhere during this era. If you saw this logo, chances are it was on this background. I'm still no closer to knowing what these blue things are meant to be, or why they became the Thunderbirds background, but to find this image, the source, the very file which the graphic designers likely pressed Ctrl-C on. I mean, I was getting excited about fonts earlier. There are lots of other great images in this folder too, instantly recognisable to anybody who's as familiar with this era as I am. Like this render of Thunderbird 1 for instance. This was everywhere as well. You know, when you say it out loud, you really realise how sad it is. The final folders on the disc are libraries of mostly stock photography. With the exception of 2 drawings, everything in here is a photograph or still from the 60s, while the series was still being made, and cherry-picked by Carlton to be used again in the 2000s revival whenever they didn't feel like using Comatose Allen over here. That's not to say that there's nothing of interest in here, as the choice of pictures in itself is quite interesting. Some are self-explanatory, like characters in cockpits or craft being launched, but others beg questions like, why is the San Martino Dam from Path of Destruction in the Tracy Island folder? Why are there 2 pictures of John's puppet in profile, one of Alan and one of Gordon's, but not one of Scott or Virgil? What were these deleted photos? The world may never know. And besides all that, playing Spot This in the Wild is just as fun as before. And that is that, for the most part. Nothing earth-shattering, and if you're not a die-hard anorak like me, possibly nothing all that interesting. But nevertheless, this disc, this Thunderbirds Style Guide for Mac and PC version 4 1965 to 1999, has been quite the trip for me. It wasn't like I was watching a behind-the-scenes documentary, but instead as if I had snuck into the long-abandoned, yet somehow pristinely preserved offices of Carlton, and was picking up all the tools and prototypes that had been left behind. And that experience was a little eye-opening. Because there's a tendency, I feel, to look at the media that surrounds us, especially that which we really like, and to think as though it somehow descended to us from a higher plane. As though Carlton, the company itself, said, "Let there be the Thunderbirds Pocket Dictionary." And there was. But even if we acknowledge that there were actually people behind it all, it's easy to subconsciously think, yeah, but they're professionals, making professional stuff, not like me. I can draw a picture of Thunderbird 1, but this one's in a magazine, so it must have been made differently in some way. And yet, this disc, an internal toolkit used by professionals on a professional marketing campaign, is full of simple text documents, JPEGs, Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator files. I can get those on my computer. You could get those on your computer. And look at Thunderbirds itself. As much as I sing its praises, it was made by people, not superhumans, who used tools that weren't reserved for some kind of TV series maker's elite. The Thunderbirds themselves were made of balsa wood. The models and scenery used bits of Airfix kits. And, say it with me now, yes, this is a lemon squeezer. That isn't to detract from the skill and effort the team possessed, and nor from that of the team behind the 2000s revival for that matter. But they weren't wizards casting spells to make what they did. They were human beings, making stuff with tools no more otherworldly than those that we've got. It's healthy to be reminded of that every once in a while. I think so anyway. So, yeah. That's pretty much all I've got to say. I'm glad I bought this thing, and it holds a special spot in my collection now. Or rather, it will once I've organised it better. And I'm thankful to anyone watching who has put up with my ramblings for this long. Believe me, it's been tough on me as well. Cheers. Okay, side note, I bought this for the joke at the end, and it turns out it is just a Collins Pocket Dictionary with a Thunderbirds cover. There isn't even an entry for Thunderbird, as in the mythical creature. It jumps straight from Thunder to Thursday. In fact, you might as well just say it's the Thunderbirds dust jacket.